Somewhere in Manhattan, on the corner of Wall Street and Nassau, there is a building that has stood since the 1800s. For 9 years, a man sat inside that building and did something no one in American history had ever done before. He stole $37 million from the United States government. He did it slowly, methodically, in plain sight. The President of the United States knew who he was, personally appointed him, called him a friend. And when it all came out, when Congress launched its investigation, when the newspapers ran the story, when the whole country demanded answers, he walked away. No prison, no trial, no consequences. He came back to New York, lived out his life, and died in his own bed. His name was Samuel Swartwout, and almost nobody has heard of him. That changes today. To understand Samuel Swartwout, you have to understand the world he was born into. America in 1783 was not yet a country with rules. It was a country with ambitions. And the difference in those early years was enormous. The men who rose to power weren't necessarily the most qualified. They were the most connected, the most loyal, the most useful to whoever happened to be in charge. Swartwout understood this from a young age. He came from a well-connected New York family, and by his 20s he had attached himself to one of the most dangerous and magnetic figures in early American politics, Aaron Burr. Yes, that Aaron Burr, the man who shot Alexander Hamilton. Swartwout and his brothers were close allies of Aaron Burr in his early career in New York politics. He remained close to Burr throughout the latter's life and was his traveling companion on several long trips. When Burr hatched his infamous Western conspiracy, a murky plot to carve out a personal empire in the American Southwest, Swartwout was in the middle of it. Swartwout carried a copy of Burr's cipher letter to General James Wilkinson in the West. When Wilkinson changed his mind about cooperating, he arrested Swartwout 100 miles from New Orleans and charged him with treason. Treason. At 23 years old. Most people's careers end there. Swartwout's was just beginning. His lawyers got him off. Burr was eventually acquitted. And Swartwout walked away from the whole episode with something more valuable than a conviction, a reputation as a man who could survive anything. Fast forward 25 years. It is 1828. Andrew Jackson is running for President of the United States, and Samuel Swartwout is one of his earliest and most passionate supporters. Jackson wins. And in America of 1829, that means something very specific. Your friends get jobs. This was called the spoils system. To the victor go the spoils. Jackson didn't invent it, but he perfected it, rewarding political loyalty with government positions regardless of qualification or integrity. President Andrew Jackson rewarded his staunch supporter Samuel Swartwout with 2 consecutive appointments as Collector of Customs at New York, where he served from 1829 through 1837. Now, the Collector of Customs at the Port of New York. Let's be clear about what this job was. New York in 1829 was the busiest port in America. Every ship that came in, every cargo of silk, tobacco, cotton, machinery, tea, paid a customs duty, an import tax, and all of that money flowed through one office, one man's hands, the collector's. The collection of customs in New York was one of the largest sources of income for the United States federal government. Jackson's own Secretary of State, Martin Van Buren, loudly opposed the appointment. He didn't trust Swartwout. He'd seen enough of him to know what kind of man he was. Jackson overruled him. Swartwout got the job, and the clock started ticking. Here is what made Swartwout's scheme so audacious and so simple. He didn't forge documents. He didn't bribe inspectors. He didn't run some elaborate con. He just didn't send the money. Instead of delivering the funds to the US Treasury as required, Swartwout began to embezzle large sums of money for his own personal gain, exploiting weaknesses in the government's accounting systems and using his position of authority to cover up his illegal activities. The system had a flaw built into it. The Treasury permitted the withholding of funds by collectors during their service. Collectors were personally liable for assessments of bonds, and if sued, had to pay any judgments against them. So collectors would stockpile customs money to cover potential personal debts. In other words, the government had accidentally designed a system where the man in charge of collecting money was allowed to hold on to it. Swartwout held on to a lot of it, year after year, quarter after quarter. The numbers in his ledgers drifted further and further from reality. The naval officer assigned to verify transactions didn't do his job. The comptrollers and auditors disregarded theirs. Nobody checked. Nobody asked. For 9 years, the most important customs house in America was being quietly emptied. And all the while, Swartwout was beloved. He was a civic figure, a political operator. He used some of the money to fund Texas independence, sending supplies and ships at his own expense, organizing fundraisers in New York for Stephen F. Austin. The man robbing America was considered a patriot. In March of 1838, Swartwout's second term as collector expired. He left office and immediately departed for England, officially to tend to some coal property he owned. Perfectly reasonable. Nothing suspicious, except after he left the country, or perhaps before, his accounts were examined, and it was then alleged that Swartwout had embezzled $1,225,000, roughly $37 million in today's money, and fled. Congress erupted. The House of Representatives launched an inquiry in 1839, publishing its conclusions as The Defalcations of Samuel Swartwout and Others, exposing widespread misappropriation of funds intended for federal coffers. The scandal had a delicious second act. Martin Van Buren, the man who had warned against Swartwout's appointment and was now president himself, appointed a new collector to clean up the mess. His name was Jesse Hoyt. In 1841, allegations began to circulate that Hoyt had also been embezzling, and he was removed from office, the replacement thief, appointed to catch a thief. Meanwhile, in London, Swartwout was in no hurry to come home. He stayed in Europe for 3 years, watching, waiting, negotiating through lawyers. He returned to the United States in 1841 after federal officials assured him that they would not prosecute him. He forfeited some personal property to partially pay the deficit. The Treasury never came close to recovering what was stolen. No arrest, no trial, no prison, just a deal, a quiet handshake, a forfeited property or two. And Samuel Swartwout walked back into New York City a free man. Samuel Swartwout lived another 15 years after returning home. He died in New York City on November 21st, 1856, and was buried at Trinity Church Cemetery in Manhattan. The same Trinity Church where Alexander Hamilton, the man whose financial systems Swartwout had spent his life exploiting, is also buried. History has a sense of humor, but Swartwout left one final legacy, one that outlasted everything else. It is believed that Swartwout's story is the origin of the term Swartwouted out, which came to define the embezzlement of a large sum of money from the United States government and subsequent escape to a foreign nation to escape punishment. His name became a verb. In the 1800s, to be Swartwouted was to be robbed blind by someone you trusted completely. We don't use that word anymore, but the thing it describes, that happens every single day. The only thing that's changed is the name of the man getting away with it. If this story made you feel something, subscribe. We post a new forgotten story every week and drop a comment. Who do you think is the modern day Swartwout? We read every single one.